War tends to bring out the worst in human innovation, especially in a war that consumes the entire world. In today's episode, I will explore some weapons that, if used, or used more, could have turned the tide of World War II. Join me on Everything Has History: Crazy Weapons of World War II. The Schwerer Gustav gun was developed by the German High Command in the 1930s for the explicit purpose of destroying the main French defensive fortification, the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line was a system of deep fortifications on the border of France to protect against the potential of a German invasion after the First World War. The Gustav gun was a formidable weapon that could penetrate 25 feet into concrete and create a 30-foot wide by 30-foot deep crater. Had this weapon become fully operational, it would potentially be a city destroyer. 3 of these massive guns were built. However, they were never used against the Maginot Line. By the time they were needed, in the war, Germany had already successfully invaded France, and therefore destruction of the fabled French defensive fortifications were pointless. The gun was so large that it needed to be transported by rail. One of the guns was sent to the Russian front and was tested in the Battle of Sevastopol. It is unlikely that the gun was ever used to much effect. Of the 3 other guns, there is no evidence that they were ever fired or used in battle. In fact, by the end of the war, the German army had destroyed one of the guns, lest it fall into the hands of the Allied troops. American troops, ironically, came across the ruins of one of the massive railguns outside of Dresden in Germany. Moving along to number 2, Fuku-Ryu, or Crouching Dragon. By the end of the war, the Japanese were desperate to defend their homeland and had resulted to suicide of kamikaze attacks. The most effective kamikaze attacks were by airplanes loaded with bombs that crashed into American ships. These attacks were highly effective and sank several American ships, costing thousands of lives. However, the strategy involved the suicide of Japanese pilots and the destruction of Japanese airplanes, further damaging the war front. Late in the war, the Japanese began testing new suits that would be attached with a mine. The soldier would go underwater and blow themselves up near an American ship and attempt to destroy it. The suits were called Fuku-Ryu, or Crouching Dragon. Many deaths and casualties came from the testing. The suits were never used in combat, but similar tactics were used against the Americans in early 1945. By the time they were ready for full use, Japan had suffered 2 atomic bombs and the end of the war was imminent. Number 3, the Panzerdrum. Germany and Japan were not the only powers to try out new weapon technologies during World War II. During the proposed invasion of France to break the grasp of Nazi Germany on Europe, the Allies looked at a large rocket-propelled wheel device. The cylinder in the middle would be loaded with explosives, and the wheels would be propelled by rockets. The device would be launched from a beach landing craft and attempt to blow through any concrete barriers the Nazis put up on the beaches. It was proposed by the British Admiralty, but the device barely worked. In the testing phases, the rockets that propelled the wheels would often just blow up or fall off. Instead of using this device on D-Day, most Allied forces, including America, Australia, Canada, Britain, stormed the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944, resulting in several thousand casualties. Had the Panzerdrum worked, its potential could have been devastating to the Germans on the beach, therefore saving thousands of lives. But it was just another legacy of failed weapons in warfare that never last. That's 3 weapons that were tested during World War II on all sides of the conflict. Thank you so much for subscribing and watching another episode of Everything Has a History. Please like this episode and comment. I'll see you on the next one.